Hey everyone. So Kamala Harris had another interview recently. This was a solo interview. She didn't have Tim Walz with her, and it was actually with local news, so the audio is not pristine. But she gave an answer when she was asked about Trump voters, and it was kind of interesting, and I thought I'd go over that. So without further ado, this is pretty far into the interview, actually. I'll roll a clip, and then we can react.
Two final questions, if I might. On the appeal of the man you were running against, as you drove here today, you likely saw a lot of Trump signs. He has an historic appeal in this country. And as you are someone running against him and trying to understand that, I wonder how you distill it. What do you understand his appeal to be? And how do you speak to his voters, or maybe people who just share his values but are open to something else?
I really like the framing of this question, actually. I think it sounds very fair to Trump. And I'm not saying that as someone who likes Trump because I don't, but I think Democratic candidates should be challenged in how they think about appealing to people who are, heavily sympathetic to Trump. So, yeah, this is a good question from Brian Taft.
I, based on experience and a lived experience, no. In my heart, I know. In my soul, I know that the vast majority of us as Americans have so much more in common than what separates us.
That's a very Kamala Harris thing to say. In her soul, she knows. But yeah, that's a pretty generic answer so far. The part about Americans having more that unites them than separates them. I feel like almost any candidate is going to have to say something like that if they're trying to have any semblance of not being divisive, of being a unifier. So, fine answer so far.
And I also believe that I am accurate in knowing that most Americans want a leader who brings us together as Americans and not someone who professes to be a leader who is trying to have us point our fingers at each other.
Um, I don't know about that. I agree, but also disagree. Uh, where I think she could be correct is that there are plenty of Americans who support Trump, who think that Trump is actually less divisive than the leaders that the Democratic Party is offering. Whether or not they're correct in believing that is up to you. I happen to believe that they're generally incorrect. I think that in the year 2024, there is pretty much no argument that Trump is the more divisive candidate than Kamala Harris, is the more divisive candidate than Joe Biden was. Um, in 2016, he might have been less divisive than Hillary Clinton, but I still think that's debatable. But yeah, I think they may very well want a candidate who is less divisive, and they happen to see Trump as that candidate. But in some cases, it's just spiteful politics, and I mean that in the sense that they see Trump and they see him pointing his finger and yelling at and quote unquote telling it like it is and calling out the people that they don't like, saying that the media is the enemy of the people, um, talking about evil rhino Republicans and Democrats, and they're like, yeah, the enemy of the enemy is my friend. This guy is fighting the establishment. This guy, I hate to use the common saying, but he owns the libs. He triggers the left, and they like him for that. And that actually is pretty much by its nature just saying, yeah, I like divisiveness. So I think she's kind of half correct here.
I think people are exhausted with that approach, to be honest with you. I think people want a leader who has common sense and tries to find common ground. I'm supported by over 200 Republicans who worked for both Presidents Bush, John McCain, and Mitt Romney. I'm supported by the former Vice President Dick Cheney, former Congress member Liz Cheney. And I think people are more.
That's a very good thing to bring up, actually, that Republicans support her. She didn't even mention the 17 former Reagan staff who came out and endorsed her and said that if Reagan were alive today, he would have supported Kamala Harris. So really good on her for bringing that up. And it's not saying she agrees with their politics. It's saying that the Republican Party basically left them. They didn't leave the GOP. The GOP left them.
Willing now, in light of the hate and division that we see coming out of Donald Trump, to say, hey, let's put country first. And I think that just makes us stronger and more healthy as a country. To say, look, we can all debate our differences around, various policies, but let's stop with the division. Like, enough of that. Let's bring everybody together.
I would streamline that argument a little bit. Instead of saying hate and division, I would say believing in a peaceful transfer of power is an important thing for these Republicans. Trump doesn't believe in that. So they're supporting me, and they have the common sense to support me. I agree generally that Trump can be hateful and divisive. Although I don't think that's actually the deal breaker here. I think that the deal breaker is the peaceful transfer of power thing. The narcissism and never ever wanting to admit that he's wrong or that he lost, and doing everything to serve himself. Not even being humble enough to concede that he lost an election, and that if he loses in 2024, he's just going to claim there's fraud and refuse to concede. So yeah, I think that even if Trump were a nice guy, were a very charming man who were not hateful or divisive, I think that the problem still exists there with the concept of democracy and the concept of a peaceful transition of power. So yeah, I would just streamline that a little bit, not say hate and division. I would tie it more to how he actually handles elections and losing, and the policy concerns that raises for democracy.
And finally, as you introduce yourself to America in a new way, they've heard much of your story at the Democratic National Convention and in that debate earlier this week. If there's one thing that you wish Americans knew about who Kamala Harris is that you don't think they know yet, what would that be?
I don't know. I mean, probably it's not very different from anybody watching right now. I love my family. One of my favorite things that I lately have not been able to do is Sunday family dinner. I love to cook. I have incredible friends. My best friend from kindergarten is still my best friend. I think that, I have a career that really, and I said it the other day, as a career prosecutor, I never asked a victim of crime, were they a Republican or a Democrat. The only thing I ever asked them is, are you okay? And I think that's the approach that most Americans want, regardless of who they voted for in the last election, in terms of turning the page and charting the way forward.
I imagine you're looking forward to cooking.
Yeah, so that was a pretty softball question. Kind of interesting point she had about asking a victim of crime if they were a Democrat or Republican. And yeah, but overall, I think her answers to some of those questions, they were all right. I think she should have mainly focused on the big questions that Trump presents for democracy, rather than talking about him being hateful and divisive. I think Americans have heard that quite enough. They heard it back in 2015 and 2016. Saying it again is just more of the same old. Now we have record of him, in January 6th, basically how he reacts to losing an election. And she should tell people, hey, we need to bury this guy in the election. And at the same time, she should not be overly divisive towards people who are sympathetic to voting for him, because there are some people who still can be swayed. Believe it or not, there are some people who have not made their minds up in this election. So she shouldn't wag her finger at them for considering voting for Trump. But yeah, that's my analysis of Harris's final two answers to her interview. Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe to this channel. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for listening. Have a great day.